holiday?
So far, so good. You know, I can't complain.
That's good. Good to see everyone.
Yeah.
Okay, hi, everybody.
Hey, Supervisor.
Hello, Supervisor.
Hi, everybody.
Hey, Judy, how you doing?
Very well.
Okay, we're showing up one at a time here. That's good. So, Linda, can you hear me?
We can hear you, Supervisor.
All right, good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hello, everyone. Ms. Vo, I've not seen you. Greetings.
It's Kim Boucher. It's been a while.
It has been. You may call me vacation girl. Hi,
Why
Heatherland.
could we call you vacation girl? Where were you?
I was up in northern Michigan. It was
I was on
beautiful.
Maui.
Yeah. Maui, aloha. Aloha.
Aloha, also beautiful, if I may say so.
I am absolutely confident of that. I'm glad to have you back safely. Hello, Ms. Pinto. Hi, Lisa. Astrid, Judy.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Hey, Linda. Nice to see you. Ramalis, welcome.
Well, hello, Kim. I'm glad to hear you had a chance for a vacation. Hopefully John had one too, but I'm glad that under all of this pressure, you guys take a break and, you know, collect yourselves because we got a lot to do now.
We do have a lot to do now, and it's, I think the team is doing a reasonably good job taking time off. I was
Good.
trying to model the way in that regard, and I'm very grateful to the team for stepping up and doing a very smooth and seamless effort in my absence.
Well, that's good. I'm glad to hear that. Lisa, how are you doing? She's got herself.
So,
I know, mute. I'm great. I'm doing really well.
You know, this is hard because I haven't had a chance to see everybody at the same time, and I miss everyone for the meeting. And I'm just hoping everyone is doing well.
Thank you for that. I see Dr. Bird is with us. Welcome.
Yes, we will be introducing Dr. Bird officially after the ground rules are all read.
Okey doke. We have Maricela. Welcome back, Maricela, one of our newer colleagues.
Hi, everybody. Thank
Hi.
you.
Welcome. Hello, Frank. Good to see you.
Hey, Kim. Great to see you as well.
Excellent. All right, Linda, I think we're going to follow your lead here in terms of kind of where we are with the quorum before you lay out your ground rules.
We do have quorum, so we can proceed with the meeting, but we are missing a few commissioners, about 5.
Supervisor?
Okay, well, I think it's always good to try to start more or less on time. So this meeting is called to order, rap, rap, rap. And please call the roll of the commissioners.
Judy Abdo,
Here.
Linda Aragon,
Here.
Robert Bird,
Here.
Astrid Hager,
Here.
Yvette Martinez,
Here.
Frank Ramos,
Here.
Romales Taylor,
Here,
Marlene Cepeda, Carla Pletez Howell, Jacqueline McCroskey, Maricela Ramirez,
Here.
Deanne Tilton, Sheila Keo.
Here.
Quorum is present.
So I show we were only missing 4. Is that correct?
Yes, we're only missing 4 now.
Although Marlene and
Okay,
Deanne
great.
just joined,
So Deanne's here?
as is Marlene.
Okay. All righty. We have a quorum. Let us move then to the ground rules for the meeting. If you would, Ms. Vo, give us an idea what the ground rules are.
Thank you, Supervisor. Good afternoon, members of the board and public. I'm Linda Vo with First 5LA. And before we begin today's meeting, I will be going over some important information. Pursuant to Governor Newsom's executive order N-25-20, members of the First 5LA Board of Commissioners or staff may participate in this meeting via teleconference. In the interest of maintaining appropriate social distancing, members of the public may observe this meeting telephonically or otherwise electronically as posted on our website and this agenda. To provide public comment, you may submit written public comments by email to lvo@first5la.org or call 213-276-9389. Please do indicate the item number your comment corresponds with. All public comments corresponding to an agenda item must be received before 1:30 p.m. the day of the meeting. Received after 1:30 p.m. will become a part of public records. All public comments received prior to 1:30 p.m. today will be read aloud at the end of each item it coincides with. Before we begin this meeting, please do note the following. Today's meeting will include video and audio, allowing all meeting participants and public members to view presentations via shared screen. And to minimize background disruptions, all board members and staff should place their lines on mute until called upon to speak. And to minimize multiple people speaking at the same time, to ensure for a coherent dialogue, if board members would like to speak to an item or have a question, please do text our board chair to express an interest. A reminder to also include your name when texting. Alternatively, you can use the hand raise function on Zoom or message me directly via the chat box function, and I will coordinate with Supervisor Q to indicate an interest in speaking. Outside of adjournment, which will be called for on by the chair, roll call will be done for all action items. And a reminder to all board members to take yourselves off mute prior to speaking. Finally, if technical assistance is required during the meeting, you can contact me at 213-276-9389, and I will connect you with IT. And with that, I want to hand this back to our honorable chair, Supervisor Q.
Thank you very much. So just to reiterate, if you want to speak during the meeting, you can text me, or you can put the indicator in your in the chat box. I guess you can raise your hand, and Ms. Vo will let me know who wants to speak. Before we get to the consent item, I want to say a little bit more about our newest member, who is the alternate member for the Department of Mental Health, Dr. Robert Byrd. You remember Christopher Thompson Kip was our alternate from DMH, and Dr. Byrd is replacing him this year. He is the acting deputy director for the Prevention Services Division at the Department of Mental Health. Got his doctorate at Pepperdine in '94, a good 27 years ago. And now he has 25 years, more than 25 years of clinical experience working with children and families, both as a private practitioner and as a member of several renowned LA County contracted community mental health organizations, where in addition to providing therapeutic services to disadvantaged populations, he supervised clinicians in training. Dr. Byrd was also involved in the development of early intervention programs and services to meet the needs of young people and families in several community-based organizations. So we're very, very happy to welcome him to our Board of Commissioners and look forward to his participation. And Dr. Byrd, as I warned you, I would be remiss if I didn't ask you if you'd like to say a few words to your fellow commissioners.
I'll keep it really short. I'm very honored to be here and look forward to the work we will be doing.
Thank you so much. There will be a lot of talk, I think, about mental health over the next, year probably, and young people. My comments today actually will touch heavily on that. So welcome, and welcome to everybody to our back to school meeting. It's a freighted term these days, I guess, so that, but it always seemed to me after Labor Day, we had just start up all our big work again. I think then we can move to our consent agenda. There's really just the minutes and transcript and one amendment to a contract. Does anybody wish to remove anything from consent? Okay. Ms. Vo, are there any public comments to the consent agenda?
There are no public comments on this item.
All right. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
This is Marlene. I move. This is Judy. I'll second.
All right. We have a motion and a second. Ms. Vo, please call the roll on the consent agenda.
Judy Abdo,
Yes.
Linda Aragon,
Yes.
Robert Byrd,
Yes.
Astrid Hager,
Yes.
Yvette Martinez,
Yes.
Rick Ramos,
Yes.
Mollis Taylor,
Yes.
Marlene Cepeda,
Yes.
Sheila Q.
Yes.
Motion is passed.
All right. Thank you so much. The next item is, as usual, item 3, the remarks by the chair. I thought a lot about what I might say today, since so much has happened and is still happening. But I have to say I was really struck by long conversation I had with a longtime friend who's a therapist about mental health issues and children. And what she said will probably sound very familiar to all of you involved with young people in any way these days, which you all are, which is that the mental health issues that people have been seeing in even very young children are much more serious than those they saw, much more prevalent and serious than those they saw before the pandemic. Not surprising. I think counselors at school facilities are really struck by how the isolation has affected, especially certain populations, but not only those populations. Though there was always a higher suicide attempt rate in our LGBTQ youth community, they're seeing a lot of suicidal ideation among young people in that community, but also beyond, depression, etc., from the isolation. And also populations of young African American men, and those who speak English as a second language. And I thought that was very interesting, because it's sort of like further isolation where you might already have been cut off for one reason or another, and different reasons. LGBTQ kids are more at risk in their own homes from disappropriation from, parents and guardians. This is not necessarily the case with ESL and young Black men, but lots of different community issues as well. The larger issue, I think, for us is how society in so many ways seems to have come unmoored. We have lost a lot of our lifelines, a lot of our standard connections, and have not found a great deal to take its place. And I was thinking about our kids, many of whom are, pre-verbal, who are really dependent on adult help. I won't just say supervision, I mean really nurturing, and also who pick up so much anxiety and angst and anger around them, and don't have really any way to deal with it. And we're not really sure what to do either in terms of mental health issues and this very, very young population. But I do know that First Five has always been innovative in trying to figure out what are the problems, what might be ways to approach any solutions. We are now a constant in so many families' lives that we would be a trusted messenger about what can happen. I was thinking today, looking at our agenda item on home-based childcare, how important the shared opportunities are in terms of looking at this population all the way down to 0 to 1, and seeing what we can do to help, not just with placement with a caretaker while parents work, but also the kind of care that can be given, the kind of help we can give to help give care, how there are shared influences on these young people that we can help to sharpen and bring together. So I think there are many opportunities as we hopefully come through and out of the worst days of the pandemic, we hope. But I don't think we yet fully appreciate the cost of it. And I certainly don't mean in money, but how this really requires some really good thinking and some good collaboration. My generation, as 0 to 5, was in the middle of World War II, and there was a huge amount of anxiety around us, which I think we couldn't help but pick up. And I was trying to think about that today. On the West Coast, there was, a lot of anxiety about whether we were going to be attacked after Pearl Harbor, who was going to be drafted, who was going to war, who would or would not come back, what we would do, who was going to be the working person in the family. It was a really anxious time, and I really have no way of knowing what the impact was on my generation, whether we, ever kind of recovered from that ongoing fear all around us, and how really strange it was. So I don't know if we're going to really understand the impact on our population, our young population of this pandemic as well. But I know we will be central in helping our many partners to help our families. So that's my comments for today. Ms. Vo, are there any public comments on the chair's comments?
There are no public comments on the chair's comments.
All right, thank you so much. Let's move then to Executive Director Bill Shea and hear what you have to say.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and welcome everyone, with a particular welcome to our board members who we have not seen for a couple of months during our summer break. So it's great to see you, albeit virtually, and to welcome Dr. Bird to his new role on the commission. I think my comments are a more internally focused complement to the supervisor's more externally facing reflections. And as I mentioned at the front end, I was on vacation for the latter part of August, which I was deeply appreciative of my colleagues for holding down the fort so ably and successfully. But when you're on vacation, you have an opportunity to kind of step back and reflect as well as relax. And I found myself coming back to a number of really critical issues that we're facing that in many respects represent some really decisive moments for us at an individual or personal level, at a societal level, as well as at an organizational level. And three I would call out with more of a internal organizational focus that I wanted to share here, because they have important implications for our work going forward over the course of the coming fall. First, it relates to COVID and vaccinations. And, in LA County, statewide, across our nation, I think we have all been incredibly sobered by the Delta variant driven surge in cases, in hospitalizations, in deaths. It is a sobering reality, particularly as we see more and more children and young people affected by COVID. And in the context of all the drumbeat of bad news, I do want us to continue to recognize that there's really good news here, which is we do have the capability to protect ourselves and safeguard others, and to really bring the pandemic to its heel, to get it under control, whether it be social distancing, mask wearing, remote working, and most fundamentally vaccinations. So it is an extraordinary development, if not miracle, that vaccines have been developed as quickly as they have with such a strong evidence base. They really do represent a turning point to bringing the pandemic under control. And I want to recognize that how everyone approaches, whether it's ourselves or family members, neighbors, the community more broadly, how people approach the decision to get vaccinated is going to be different for us all. And so for me, I follow the science, I follow public health, and I encourage others to do likewise. I also understand other people have different trusted sources of information. For some, First 5 LA may be that trusted source, but I just want to underscore, as I have with my team colleagues broadly, that for those who are still not vaccinated and are seeking information, reach out to trusted resources, because it is absolutely critical for themselves, for their colleagues, for their children and the broader community. As it relates to COVID and vaccinations, we all have personal choices to make, absolutely. There's important decisions at an individual level in terms of our behaviors and practices. Certainly decisions at more of a societal level in terms of public policy, and as an organization. So we have some decisions we'll need to make, and I, as the executive director, ultimately am responsible and accountable for those decisions. And I just want to underscore with the board and to my colleagues broadly, how I approach the issues to date have been, I think, very explicitly and transparently grounded in the health and well-being of the team, and grounded in public health and the science, and will continue to do so. The second big issue that I see us navigating is around our return to on-site work. And the pandemic, there are some some positives, and one of which is we have been able to really lean into the opportunity to work remotely and to demonstrate for ourselves what has worked well and what has worked less well. And I think we have an opportunity, this is another, as I would say, kind of inflection point, an opportunity to reimagine, to rethink how we approach work, how we support workers, how we interact with and engage in the workplace. There's been a lot of discussion about returning to work. There are often questions employers will ask employees in terms of, do you want to return to work? If so, how many days? I'm not sure those are necessarily the right questions, even though I want to share with the board, those were questions we asked of our colleagues at First 5 LA when we were doing some recent survey work. But, you know, informed by further thinking, I think some of the questions that are more relevant to us is like, so what have we been missing? You know, what have we longed for that when in the context of us not being able to meet physically? What didn't we miss and are ready to discard? What are some new approaches to our work, to meeting, to collaboration that we had to, through necessity, experiment with during the pandemic, and perhaps somewhat to our surprise, have worked out really well. So I think there's an opportunity in the coming months to really think creatively about how we reinvent, reimagine, rethink the workplace and our connection to the workplace. And you know, the board will be an important part of that discussion, and even more so our employees. And I want to thank them for their input to date. But I want to invite us to really think carefully about, you know, what are the aspects of in-person work that we have to hold tight to and hold dear? What aspects of our work are best suited to in-person versus remote work? Because if work can be done remotely, we should be doing it remotely. I think that's part of the lessons we've learned. Final inflection point I would share for us individually, collectively, and organizationally is around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I talked a little bit about this in my highlights for the board report. And here I just want to emphasize some of the more internally focused work that we have been doing or in the course of the recent months. And I don't want to minimize for a moment the externally facing work that we are doing. And indeed, that is increasingly centering DEI and how we approach our work and what we are doing. And I think you'll hear some examples in today's agenda in terms of procurement reform as well as home-based childcare about how DEI is increasingly being centered in and advancing our work. But what I want to touch on here is the centering of DEI and how we do our work. I really want to commend the team for leaning into the reality that we can't separate, you know, the impact we seek from who we are and how we work together, and that living and leaning into our values, particularly diversity, equity, and inclusion, is absolutely critical to who we are, what we represent, what we aspire to be, and importantly, how we work together to maximum effectiveness. So there's some big issues in front of us. And as I say, I'm appreciative of how engaged our team has been. I'm appreciative of the board for the counsel and wisdom to date and over the course of the next number of months as we grapple with these three big and other issues, to be sure. And the opportunity for First 5 LA, not just to learn from others, but you know, I'm really proud of how this organization is leading the way in many cases and how we approach COVID-19 and support one another's health and well-being, how we engage in our work around returning to the on-site work as well as our work around DEI. I think there's some really terrific leadership opportunities for us here, grounded in our values. So I'm glad to be back, eager to engage the board on some important topics today that we're seeking your approval on. Back to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Kim. Ms. Vo, are there any public comments on the executive director's comments?
There are no public comments on the executive director's comments.
All right, thank you so much. Then let us move to the next item, which is a public hearing on the procurement policy, which is required by the language in Prop 10. Whenever we act on a proposed procurement policy reform. I think we last approved the procurement policy in 2014. So we will have a presentation about it. We did hear a bit about it before. And at the end of the presentation and public comment, I will ask for a motion to approve the proposed procurement policy. So let me turn it over to Jasmine, I think, and Jennifer to do the presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Jasmine Frost, Interim Chief Operating Officer. As you recall, we presented our procurement policy reform to you at the July Board of Commissioners meeting, of which you provided valuable feedback. So that, along with guidance from our legal counsel and other parties, we have incorporated the feedback into this final policy for your approval today. With me here is Jennifer Eckert, who was instrumental in driving this process, and she will be presenting the details and answering any questions you may have. With that, I turn it over to Jennifer for her presentation. Take it away, Jennifer. Thank you. Jennifer.
Is there a glitch?
Jennifer, you're still on mute. Are you having a hard time getting off of mute? Okay.
Jennifer, can you approve the unmute?
Okay, thank you.
There we go.
Okay.
Good job.
All right. Thanks, Jasmine, and good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm excited to be back to present the draft procurement policy for your consideration and approval. In July, I provided you with an overview of the project, highlighted some key policy changes, and sought your feedback on the recommendations. Today, I'll provide a quick recap and overview of the project and our work to date, summarize the revisions to the policy, and dig into specific board feedback and how that was incorporated in the revised policy. And then I'll close with next steps. As a reminder, the policy was last updated and approved by the board in 2013. The objective of the procurement reform project was to align our policy and processes with our current strategic direction and values and enable more effective and efficient implementation of the strategic plan. And as the chair noted, to comply with Prop 10, this item is presented today as a public hearing. I presented our approach to this project at the last board meeting. This is just meant to serve as a reminder that we worked with our consultants to develop an approach that considered how we spend our dollars by procurement and contracting thresholds, referred to as the spend analysis. We also conducted staff interviews and focus groups to capture learnings from implementation of the current policy. We compiled benchmarking data on peer organizations and researched best practices from 2 national public procurement associations. These 4 components and the guiding principles I previously covered, along with the board's feedback in July, inform the policy recommendations presented today. Once the board approves the policy, staff will proceed to revise our existing processes to support implementation of the policy. Through the process I just described, we set out to address the challenges attributed to the current procurement policy and processes that have resulted in inefficiencies, operational issues, and outdated procurement strategies and methods. The slide summarizes the revisions included in the policy to address these issues. The table provided in attachment D, which begins on page 127 of the board packet, describes the policy changes in more detail. And later in the presentation, I will review the outcomes we hope to achieve as a result of these policy changes. Policy changes include increased procurement and contracting thresholds, An example of this, which I covered in the July presentation, is the increase to the executive director threshold for approval of contracts. This would increase the current threshold of $75,000 to the new threshold of $150,000. And any contract above that would be presented to the board for approval. Additionally, the current policy is more direct services oriented, whereas the revised policy supports our current strategic direction and policy and systems change and incorporates the organization's values, like the inclusion of DEI goals. The policy also incorporates other procurement methods like piggybacking and cooperative agreements, where we were able to take advantage of procurements conducted by other public agencies and increase our purchasing power. These are longstanding practices at public agencies, but a fairly new method for First 5 LA. Next, the policy also includes additional legal requirements related to procurement that the organization already complies with. Examples include requirements around public works, conflict of interest laws, and our ability to utilize and access state contracts. It also clarifies roles and assigns responsibilities to the appropriate functional teams and offices. There's greater clarity between staff as the user or requester, the contract and purchasing team as the implementer, and the executive director and the board as approvers of contracts. And finally, the policy proposes ways to address operational issues, specifically how we handle emergencies and the approval of contracts when the board is not in session, when it is above the executive director's threshold. This is the area in which we received the most feedback from the board, so I wanted to spend some time going over our revised recommendation. In July, we requested board feedback on the recommendation that would delegate contract authority to the executive director above the threshold of $150,000 in cases of an emergency or when the board is not in session. That recommendation, however, did not include a cap or ceiling on the authority. The board's feedback on this was to consider guardrails to regulate any potential for abuse in the future, regardless of who is serving as the executive director. In response to the board's feedback on this, staff are recommending the following. In an emergency or when the board is not in session and an immediate need is identified critical to operations, we are requesting the board delegate to the executive director the authority to approve contracts over 150, but not to exceed 300,000. This will require concurrence of the board chair, and any actions taken by the executive director and the chair shall be reported to the full board as information at the next scheduled meeting. If there's ever a situation under these circumstances where a contract must be approved over 300,000, the board may convene a special meeting for immediate approval. A special meeting can be called by the chair at any time with 24 hours notice to the public. With that comes the potential for delays, but the higher threshold decreases the likelihood that this would even be necessary. So this recommendation only applies to emergencies or contracts essential and critical to operations. And emergencies are specifically defined in the policy as time-limited purchases that are essential to the health, safety, and welfare of personnel or for the protection of property, systems, and assets. In addition, there may be circumstances in which we need to restore and continue operations should an unanticipated event occur. To make this more concrete, I have listed some examples of these circumstances. They include natural or man-made disasters, such as earthquakes, flooding, or fires, infrastructure or equipment failures, critical health emergencies, critical security emergencies, major cybersecurity or data breaches, and any other unanticipated events that make it impossible for the organization to perform a statutory or critical function. Hopefully, these examples help illustrate the circumstances in which this higher threshold applies. All other feedback provided by the board, which was primarily around language revisions, were addressed and summarized in the board memo, which begins on page 109. So I wanted to remind the board of the intended outcomes, which I also covered in July. We hope that these proposed policy changes and forthcoming process refinements will increase our efficiency conducting procurements, that this will speed up contracting approvals, reduce the board's time on small dollar contracts, improve the contractor grantee experience with our procurement processes, and yield more diverse businesses participating in our processes and funded by First 5LA. Once the policy is approved, our legal counsel will revise our bylaws to reflect the new thresholds and delegation in alignment to this policy, which will be presented to the board for approval in the coming months. Concurrently, the project team, with the support of a cross-functional work group, will develop processes to support the revised policy. We will continue to partner with the Office of Equity Strategy and Learning to develop and incorporate DEI strategies and approaches. The project team will also develop a plan to phase out the implementation of the policy and conduct staff trainings. Although we have attempted to future-proof the policy, we will return to the board if through implementation, we learn that additional changes are needed. Okay, so before I wrap up, I just wanted to thank everyone involved in this work. That includes our leadership, staff, the CAP department, legal counsel, our consultants, the project team, and the executive committee, as well as the full board. I wanted to thank you all for your input and guidance in this process. And with that, I'll hand it back to the chair for any comments or questions.
All right, thank you. Let me call first on Marlene.
Unmute.
Sorry, I am muted. Thanks, Commissioner Taylor. Jennifer, I wasn't at the last commission meeting, and it might have been addressed, and I'm not necessarily opposed to the $300,000 cap that is mentioned, but I'm just wondering how that figure was arrived at.
So we didn't have a lot of past contracts to look at because it's so infrequent that we actually use the emergency requirement in our policy, but I think it was more forward thinking. So we thought that with the increase, we would be likely to be more responsive if those occur. But again, looking back, we had not had that need. And because we had the emergency authority during this pandemic, we were able to utilize that emergency authority this time.
So basically what you're saying is it's kind of a guesstimate.
That's correct.
Okay. Well, yeah, since we don't have, I thought maybe you had averaged out some contract figure or something like that, but given your examples, you don't have a lot of histories to be able to do that. So I get that, but thank you for that.
Okay, anything else, Marlene? Hearing none, call next on Judy. Judy?
Need to unmute, Judy.
I was trying. It said the host won't let me. So now I'm unmuted. I'd like to make the motion to approve this item.
Okay, I have a comment from Romales first, but I'll take that as a motion. And after Romales, we'll look for a second.
Thank you.
All right. First of all, I want to thank you, Jennifer and Jasmine, for listening to the board and what our concerns were in incorporating a number of those things. I just have some clarification questions because number one, one item you said we are doing is to do a more upstream coordination with the CAP in order to make the contracting process more fluid and the timely contracting more timely. And so it was supposed to be in the policy. Maybe you can help me find out where in the policy it is, because I didn't see it in the draft. So can you tell me exactly where that upstream requirement in policy is?
Yes, so there is mention of it under, I believe it's application, where we state that the user is required to engage CAP for all procurement covered under this policy. So the requirement there is to engage CAP for any actions taken under this policy, but we will be specifying how and when they are to engage CAP. Like, more details will be included in our procedures.
Okay, that's the clarification I was looking for, because I didn't see it, but so good. I just wanted to know where that was going to be covered. Great. The other question I have is, or it really is a statement. When we get to the piggybacking, I thought that was really good. It says in the policy that it's the state that you're going to piggyback with. But you mentioned in your oratory that it was going to be including other agencies that you were going to try to piggyback on, which makes sense, but it's not in the policy. So are you going to add that to the policy so that it's more inclusive? Because this seems to focus only on the state contract.
So there's two sections in the policy. One mentioned our ability to access and utilize the state of California's contract. So that's a separate allowance, legal allowance that we have as first fund play. And then separately under piggybacking, there's mention of our ability to piggyback with any public entity.
Well, that wasn't clear for me. So hopefully it'll be clearer in the final document, because it doesn't say that here. At least I haven't seen it. And so I'm just adding that to saying that's a clarification I would like to see, because it makes sense. It's a good idea. The last thing I have is under diversity, equity, and inclusion. That was a great improvement in the way you wrote it and the clarification throughout the whole document of the first 5 LA's practice. But under that policy, it says that first 5 shall collect, monitor, and use data and diversity, equity, and inclusion and information. But it doesn't say who's going to do that. Is that going to be clarified in the policy or in the procedure or not?
Yes, so that would be spearheaded by CAP, but in partnership with OESL. And more details about how we would go about that and who would do that would be included in the procedures manual.
Okay, because one of the things I would like to see as a commissioner, an annual report or some kind of report on how we're doing relevant to this. So even if it's not in the policy, it should be in the procedure somewhere, that it comes back to the commission to say how we're doing and what we're achieving. You know what I mean?
Understood. Yes. And so what we hope to do is once the policy is approved, and then we roll out and finalize the process, we are going to, through that process, work with OESL to embed DEI strategies and approaches into our processes. And it's through that process that we would also be discussing what we're going to be tracking and collecting, what we're going to be monitoring, and how that would be reported out to the board.
Because I'd like your achievements to be noted and recommend and identified so we can applaud you on it when that time comes. So I'm just trying to say that I think this is a very big improvement on the last one, and we really appreciate it. At least I do, and I think others appreciate it as well.
Thank you. And I just want to also thank Seed and Antoinette for their support in writing up the policy.
That's it.
Okay, thank you. Romulus, are you finished? I'm sorry.
Yes, I am.
All right, great. I think it's interesting. Some of us are being muted by the host and then have to keep unmuting. So I'm not sure what's going on with the settings. But perhaps you could check those. And I have a motion. I have no other requests for comments by commissioners. I have a motion and I need a second before we take public comment.
I would love the second.
All right, thank you so much. Is there any public comment on this item?
There are no public comments on this item.
All right, good. Then let us call the roll on this motion, which, to clarify, let me just look and see. I think we're just approving the procurement policy. Is that correct, Craig? Is that good enough for the motion?
Yes, that's correct.
All right, good. So the motion is to approve the procurement policy. Please call the roll.
Judy Abdo,
Yes.
Linda Aragon,
Yes.
Robert Byrd,
Yes.
Astrid Hager,
Yes.
Yvette Martinez,
Yes.
Frank Ramos,
Yes.
Romulus Taylor,
Yes.
Marlene Zepeda,
Yes.
Sheila Q.
Yes.
Motion is passed.
All right, great. Thank you, everyone who worked so diligently on this. This is a good policy, and I'm happy that we have now adopted it. We're going to take a 10-minute break. So that means we will come back at 2:27, and hope you all enjoy the next 10 minutes of your break. See you at 2:27. Okay, we're ready to come back into session. And I'm assuming that everybody is back on and had a nice stretch, filled up their cold drink glass, etc. So the next issue, also of great interest to us, and looking forward to this presentation as well. We are looking at the end of this for a motion to both approve a strategic partnership with the Child Care Alliance of Los Angeles and to authorize the agreement for the first 16 months of that. So let us then move to item 7 related to home-based child care strategy. And Becca, I think you're going to kick off the presentation if I'm correct.
You are correct. Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Chair and Commissioners. I'm Becca with the team. Today, the EC team is following up on the conversation started at our June PPC meeting about our emerging strategy around home-based childcare providers. And with me today are my 2 colleagues that are leading this strategy, Gina and Kevin. So today our presentation is going to cover 2 related topics. The first is an update on the development of our overall strategy for home-based care, including how we are incorporating feedback we heard from the Commission. The second portion is required administrative actions needed to start our work. As the Chair said, action on a strategic partnership with the Child Care Alliance of Los Angeles, and the subsequent contract needed to start the work on the landscape analysis. As this strategy develops, we anticipate other administrative actions will be needed as we expand our contracted partners. So before I hand it over to Kevin, who's going to present on some context for home-based childcare, I just want to be very clear on our goals for this strategy. So first, we want to improve our and our partners' understanding of home-based care in an effort to identify how First 5 LA can implement systems change to better support home-based providers. And we want home-based childcare providers to be better supported so that they can better provide quality early learning experiences and ultimately improve outcomes for children. So I will now hand it over to Kevin to talk through what we currently know about home-based childcare. Kevin?
Good afternoon, Commissioners. So I wanted to provide a little bit of context around what we are talking about when we say home-based childcare. So some home-based childcare is licensed and some is license exempt. And some of these home-based settings may or may not accept or receive subsidy payment, and some may not. Home-based care is actually the majority of non-parental care in LA County, and particularly so for infants and toddlers. And home-based care is actually preferred by many families because it offers many attractive features that are appealing to families. It might be closer to home or to work. It may be far more affordable than center-based care. It may offer traditional or overnight hours. The provider may be someone who's already known or trusted by them or members of their community. The provider may be able to speak the family's home language. And there are, of course, other reasons as well. And non-parental care for infants and toddlers is mostly provided by home-based childcare providers, and infants and toddlers are also the group for whom the lack of access to quality care is most acutely felt in LA County. And despite the prominence of home-based childcare in LA County, many of the public supports designed for early learning settings are really designed for center-based settings, like, for example, the California State Preschool Program site. And as such, home-based childcare providers really do not have equitable access to the resources they need to provide the highest quality of care to children. And that's true both for licensed home-based care, but it's even more acutely felt by license-exempt providers. Next slide. And I want to build off my previous point, which is to provide you with a little bit of data. Subsidized care in LA County is mostly occurring in home-based settings. The green ones are home-based settings. That darker green is our FCC, and the lighter green is the FFN. And in short, our subsidized system in LA County is really a home-based system. Only about 20% of subsidized care is occurring in a center-based setting. Next slide. And our strategy is really meant to elevate the role of home-based childcare in LA County's broader early learning ecosystem. Home-based childcare is really the foundation of our entire system and serves children and communities in which public systems have really historically underinvested. So any discussion of quality early learning in LA County must include and center home-based childcare. And really, despite this critical contribution to children's development, and especially for infants and toddlers and dual language learners, even today, home-based childcare providers are not allowed equal access to the same resources available to publicly funded center-based providers. And to that end, we need to know more about home-based childcare. And by centering their voices, our hope is that First 5 LA will impact public systems changes to better meet the unique needs of home-based childcare providers and also improve their ability to provide quality early learning experiences and ultimately improve child outcomes. And with that, I'll hand it back over. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. So with that context, sort of where are we in our strategy development? So as commissioners will remember, we presented this strategy at the June PPC meeting. During that meeting and in subsequent conversations with commissioners, we received input and feedback to strengthen our overall approach and direction. And we have refined our approach based on that input. So we put together a table over the next 2 slides of the feedback we heard in addition to our refinements, and I just want to walk through that now. So first, there was a lack of clarity around sequencing and milestones. So we've now cleaned up our ultimate goal for the strategy, which I reviewed at the beginning of this presentation. We've also added phases to our strategy, which Gina will review in more detail later in the presentation. We also clarified our role. First 5 LA is leading this strategy and firmly in the driver's seat. While our first contract is with the Child Care Alliance of Los Angeles, they are only contracted for a portion of the work at our direction, and we anticipate more contracted partners as we get further into the strategy. The Alliance is the only network of resource referral agencies and alternative payment agencies in LA County. For clarity on the strategic partnership, which is the action memo before commissioners today, this memo justifies a procurement exemption for the Alliance because of that unique role within the system. The procurement exemption is if approved, is good for up to 5 years, but does not guarantee any further contracting. The only definitive contract in front of the commission is for $250,000 for the landscape analysis. All subsequent contracts above the executive director's authority will require board approval. And last on this slide, in order to broaden our reach of partners, we are planning on forming a provider advisory group, which the team will be developing this fall. This group will be sitting side by side with us in the front seat of that car, helping to inform the design of our strategy and subsequent activities. We truly believe that those impacted by our decisions should be making decisions alongside us. And in this case, that would be the home-based childcare providers themselves. Next, we are planning on adding community briefings throughout the landscape analysis and subsequent phases of our strategy to get further and broader buy-in and input. And finally, we are creating a targeted list of partners to engage. These partners will include, but are not limited to, the Child Care Providers United and different county agencies. We are also working closely with several teams and offices throughout First 5 LA. The first and most important are our colleagues of the communities team. We've explored several avenues for alignment and will be working closely with the regional network grantees as we develop the strategy broadly, and more specifically, we'll use their expertise in the community as we design our partner engagement and provider advisory group. In addition to the points made previously around the connection to the work in Best Start and with the RNGs, I also want to highlight that the ECE team has a parent survey panel, which allows us to dialogue with families in real time as we develop and execute on this strategy. We're also working closely with internal colleagues to ensure continuity and connection with various current county efforts. Lastly, we heard a lot of feedback on the need to create more comprehensive supports for families, particularly if they are outside our more formal public systems of childcare. While this is not squarely within the ECE team's expertise, since we work on changing the public system of early learning, we plan on partnering both internally and externally as we learn what support for families might be most impactful. I'm now going to hand it over to Gina, who will be doing a deep dive into the phases of our strategy.
Thank you, Becca, and good afternoon, commissioners. I'll be providing the overview of the home-based childcare strategy. So because this is new territory for us, we'll be in a learning posture and developing the strategy as we go, informed by our learning. We plan on updating the commission often, both to share our findings and to solicit feedback on the direction and the approach. We've outlined a few broad phases and we'll continue to fill in the details as we learn more about home-based care. So the first phase includes launching the landscape analysis and the provider advisory group comprised of home-based childcare providers by this fall. The second phase is to complete and learn from the landscape analysis to inform our strategy and our partners. Phase 3, in partnership with key stakeholders, decide on the various pilots and tests. Integration with existing funding streams would be a priority. Phase 4, look at lessons learned and determine which pilots can be successfully integrated into the existing systems. And phase 5, create sustainable systems change and inform policy priorities along with partners. Next slide, please. So to share more on the first phase, and the phase we'll be entering now, it's to establish a strategic partnership with the Alliance, giving staff procurement authority for up to 5 years. This will provide staff flexibility in having a vehicle to procure services if needed. Any contracts exceeding the ED's contracting authority between the Alliance and First 5 LA will need to be approved by you, the Commission. In this space, staff is also working on developing a provider advisory group of family childcare providers, family, friends, and neighbors to give voice, inform, guide the home-based strategy and the various activities tied to it. As we learn more, we'll continue to work and contract with entities, specifically community-based organizations that are nested in communities where families and children and home-based providers are at. We're also committing to hearing from parents during the process, during this phase and the other phases as well. Next slide, please. So your action for today is to approve the 5-year strategic partnership, which allows staff the ability to contract with the Alliance for relevant work for a period of up to 5 years, not to exceed $5 million. And also to authorize staff to enter into a contract for the landscape analysis for a period of 16 months, not to exceed $250,000. All subsequent contracts in excess of Kim's contracting authority will be brought to the board for consideration and approval prior to execution. Our next steps is to utilize expertise to build internal staff capacity with the ECE team and integrated teams, which includes the staff from communities, family supports, ECE, and health systems, provide technical assistance for the ECE provider group, and launch the landscape analysis by executing the contract this month. At this point, we'd like to invite your questions, comments, and open it up for discussion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't see any requests on my phone. Does anyone wish to make a comment or a question?
Marlene Supervisor raised her hand.
Okay, Marlene.
Thank you. You know that I'm going to have a lot of questions, Gina and Becca. First of all, this is music to my ears, I have to tell you. I'd been advocating for this issue even before I was a commissioner because of the issue that our most vulnerable children are within these populations with these caregivers. And we as a field in early education have been very remiss in basically ignoring them to a large degree or minimizing their role. And it took a pandemic to bring this into focus, unfortunately, but this is where we are. But so that's really good that we're doing this. And I know it's going to be a learning experience for all of us. I think that the most vulnerable children are probably going to be in exempt care. And this is maybe where Dwayne can really help us out with, because that's a whole different ball of wax. And when you talk about an advisory committee, I'm just wondering how you're going to structure that. Maybe you don't know yet how you're going to do that, but I just think this kind of traditional way that we do advisory committees ain't going to fly with this population. And we need to think of maybe some alternative modalities for advisory meetings, because one of the issues with, as you well know, and everybody that does research knows, the people that participate are the people that are more predisposed to change and more predisposed to hearing what you have to say and giving you socially desirable responses, et cetera. But oftentimes those are not the populations that are more at need. So, and I know you know that. I was happy to hear that you're going to include the family child care networks. I think that they will play a major role, I think, in this work. And we need to rely on peer group kind of education within this work. And then finally, I'm particularly interested in the landscape analysis insofar as what they're researching or thinking about in terms of language access, because so many of our providers do not speak English is not their primary language, and beyond Spanish, which is something I've been talking about for a while. So we need to think about that in this work. And then what is that intersectionality going to look like with the DLL pilot that is going on in the county? So those are my comments. I don't know if you want to react to any of that.
I mean, super helpful. I think we're in the process right now. It's one of our new colleagues, former childcare provider herself. Stephanie is really part of the provider advisory group, and one of the first pieces she's doing is she's actually interviewing folks who've done what's working, what's not working. I think you're exactly right. Think through, just sort of set and have a monthly meeting. We need to be thinking through different works and how are we connecting providers where they're at, rather than asking providers to sort of meet us where we're at. And then the other piece is providers for their expertise. How are they compensated for their time? So those are all sort of issues that we're working through this fall. We'll have more information for the commission sort of as we develop that, but we're sort of in still the planning stages for that piece. And then, yes, can't agree with you more on especially the language piece. We're thinking through sort of as the research is being conducted, it needs to be more than just English and Spanish. What other languages do we need to be working on? And then also the outreach too, because it's more than just sort of translating into different languages, but what sort of outreach techniques are we using, and who are we partnering with to do that outreach to make sure that we're reaching as many diverse communities as possible.
Thank you.
Okay, Marlene, anything else?
No, not at this time, Sheila. Thanks.
All right, thank you so much. Carla, you're next.
I really appreciate First 5 LA focusing on family, friends, and neighbors. When I think about what Kevin presented in the data, family, friends, and neighbors in Los Angeles County are carrying incredible work on behalf of our communities. They are running businesses, mostly women, very strong women that are contributing to our economy. In addition to contributing to our economy, they have this incredible drive to help bring some of the children that have struggled with what the supervisor talked about earlier. So there is a lot they are carrying on behalf of all of us. And when I think of this particular work that is being presented for us, it is about uplifting those strengths that are very, very clear that were elevated in Kevin's data, and making sure that they are the drivers, the heroes of whatever it is that our study ends up finding. So what I heard, Becca, and I think is really terrific, is we are going to diversify voices to ensure that there are the individuals that are doing the work themselves and diversity of voices for the groups that are looking to drive that aspirational piece of the story. I heard we will also have updates from staff to make sure that we're checking this. This is new for all of us. And the brain trust that exists here, making sure that that's part of it. And that is really, really useful in moving forward. So with those shifts based on conversations that were had 2 months ago at this meeting, I just want to express a lot of gratitude to you, Becca, for carrying a lot of this, for reaching out to a really diverse group of partners and giving us the steps that will make sure that we are checking this so that it is a helpful contribution to the field as we move forward. So gratitude to you and the team for really pulling this together.
Yeah.
All right, thank you very much. Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna express my gratitude back. You know, our direction and approach is stronger, more refined because of all the support and feedback from all of you on the commission. So just really, really appreciate that.
All right, Romalis, you are next.
Well, thank you. I think, Becca, that a lot of the commissioners have already said their thanks and gratitude, but I want to give my personal thanks and gratitude to you and the team for hearing what we had to say. But I want to also say that just like Commissioner Howell said, you have a team of commissioners that want to support you, want to support this hard, good work that needs to be done. I think you know that. And hopefully no harm, no foul, but you know I'm passionate about this same issue that they are. The issue is we want to hear from the people. I'm a community person, so you want to hear from the people what they think and what needs to be done. What really is hard for me, and then I hope you will think about it and what we need to do in supporting you in that, or whoever needs to take this lead if you recommend it, if we have to get a consultant. But we have this a group of parents and families and caregivers and members that are doing this in the community that don't get a dime from government to do it. And what's going to happen with those children? COVID has made it worse. I've shared with you and some of the commission that a little thing that was done in USA Today where the COVID is devastating these children and these families to try to get something done and what's going to happen to them. And it's all about these families that they stayed there and they were in the battle day one. They never walked away, and they've been helping us stay open and do what we got to do. So that means we need to step it up and come up with what we need to do. And if that, you know, I'm not hung up on the dollar about this because I think I'm with Marlene. It's about time we deal with this and come up with strategies and models that talk about how we're going to help the exempt family. I know it's not a part of this model that you're working on right now, but I think we need to expand this. And if not this, come back to us with another plan outside of this that deals with this effectively, that says, what are the strategies we're going to do to help model something that's going to help those exempt families and neighbors and parents and friends that are doing it. And it's multicultural. So to me, it's got to be a very culturally competent effort across the board. If we don't have a cultural competency in the group that's going to get in there and provide input, I'm with the rest of the commissioners, we're going to already see a red flag, just so you know. And so the idea is that you want to hear from the people that need it and that are doing it, what they have to say. Great job. I got to give you kudos. A great job in this, and hearing us and putting it in there. Totally right on. Nothing more we can ask. We're going to ask you, what do we need to do to help you? That's what I'm saying. So I'm twisting it around now and saying, what do we need to do? And hear me very clearly. I'm with you about this, but I want to know what we're going to do about those exempt families and what does that model look like? The government can't afford to bail out everything, but we can do something, whatever that is. And I'm looking to the team and all the commissioners to say, based on what you're doing and what it is, what can we do to help them? I threw out some kind of things and just throwing it out in the last meeting, but there must be something we can do to help them get a more quality, because I want to see every child thrive and to succeed in school and in life. And we can't do that when all these little babies and stuff in the homes are not getting anything of quality of anything, because we're not teaching those people how to do it in any way or an informative way. And so I'm just hopeful that we will also expand out to deal with that as well. Thank you very much. Thank your team very much. Thank all the commissioners that have put their word out here. I think this is an outstanding concept and approach. So thank you so much. That's all I wanted to say. And I'm ready to vote whenever anybody else is.
Okay, thank you, Romulus. I have Jackie next.
Well, I just wanted to say, to begin with, the same thing. Your team has been so fabulous in discussion and interaction. The product shows it. Really an exemplary process of exchange. So thank you. I can't help but think, because I'm really old and I've been around First Five for a long time, about the first effort that I think it was the first effort that First Five made around home-based childcare in the first couple of years. And Deanne will probably remember too, that we partnered with the public television station to develop some really great content for home-based providers. It was a breakthrough at that time, and it really was wonderful content. But one of the reasons why I'm so proud of us now and so excited about this next stage is that we're not just giving to the home-based providers, we are engaging, and we're saying, you are the ones who actually know what needs to happen. Yay. And we also have mentioned parents, because I think that's the other key group, and we're not quite there yet, because it's even harder to figure out how you get all those voices, right? But I just wanted to say, one of the things I think one of the major lessons I walked away with from the Assembly Blue Ribbon Commission is that when you ask for provider voices and parent voices, and you can align what they are seeing and what they are saying, we really can make huge steps forward. And you really can't do it without those two sets of voices. So thank you guys, really, really great work, and looking forward to the next steps.
All right, thank you, Jackie. Anyone else before I make my comments? I didn't see Deanne. I'm getting a call from you, but I think you meant to text to say that you'd like to speak. So, yes?
You're muted.
Deanne, you're still on mute.
On mute.
Am I not on mute now?
We got you now.
Hear you now.
Be patient with me. I'm very pleased. Obviously, I'm particularly concerned about this age group we're talking about, because they are the most vulnerable children. And along with that goes many challenges that we don't see otherwise with childcare. So let me just throw in my protective suggestion here, and that is that we remember that they are vulnerable, and unfortunately we have had some tragedies in childcare that resulted from a lack of understanding of such issues as safe sleep and the very challenging nature of infants and toddlers. So if, for example, we want to support these caregivers, these exempt caregivers, I would say let's be sure we talk about the relationship with the natural parents, because that is critical to being able to understand this child, to provide care for this child, and to effectively transfer this child between a setting that is not their own home. Kids, and Sheila said, Sheila, our chairperson, said it so well. These kids are in large part traumatized. A lot of kids are in care because of grief and loss. They have lost someone in their family, even though they're maybe 2 or 3 years old. Some of them have witnessed violence, and often these challenges are what results in a failure of the placement of the child in a particular child care setting. We've had some issues with the language barrier, and I echo Marlene, it's not just Spanish, it's Asian languages, it's Middle Eastern languages. These are issues that are reflected in this way. Parents place their children, their infants and toddlers, in homes that speak their language, and sometimes their options are minimal. So we've seen situations where there was only one home childcare option for a family because of a language issue. So if we do support these families, these providers, let's talk about things like promoting relationships with the parents, helping them with developmental boundaries, and also, for example, if we want to promote safe sleep, maybe we should think about helping provide a place for this infant or toddler to sleep. Sometimes the safe environment is not there. So in any case, I'm thrilled because we are talking about the highest need population, and we are in a very high need period of time now. So that's it.
All right, thank you, Deanne. Anyone else wishing to speak, just speak up. I don't have any more requests. Going once, going twice. Well, I do have a few thoughts myself as well. I want to thank the staff, as everyone else appropriately has, for the work put in on this, and also the Child Care Alliance of Los Angeles, because there has been such an ongoing effort and really a difficult undertaking to really bring together a very disparate group of people and entities that simply thought, well, this would be a good thing to do in my home and to serve my neighbors and, the neighborhood. All the way back in 1989, when Abby Liebman and I started the California Women's Law Center, one of the first things that we were doing was threatening to sue cities that were outlawing in-home childcare, which they could not do under state law, but they seemed not to be paying much attention to state law. So we would go around rattling a saber at them so that there could be in-home childcare. But there was very little communication about how would folks be trained, if they would be trained, if they were to be licensed or not. A lot of conversation and a lot unknown about them. So this is a very, very important step, I think, for First Five to take with the Alliance. And I think it is one of those truly important, underrated areas. There's always been a lot of prejudice about in-home childcare, that center-based childcare was either licensed or approved in some way, or that training went on, etc. But that doesn't mean everybody wanted to send their children there. Many times you think, well, this is a neighbor I know. She's taking care of these 4 children, and it's just a great thing. So it's important for us to kind of get the scope of how big this is across our county and how important it is to so many of our communities. Like anything that is a little less formal, it gets a lot less love from local governments, from funders, from anybody looking to help children but not knowing how to find the places to do so. So I think this is an even more important strategy than we had even thought of in the beginning. So I totally approve. And what we're looking for now is a motion that would cover both of these things to approve a strategic partnership with the Child Care Alliance of LA for an amount not to exceed $5 million over 5 years, and to authorize our staff at First 5 LA to execute an agreement in the amount of $250,000 for a period of 16 months to complete the home-based childcare landscape analysis. May I have a motion to that effect?
This is Judy. Yes, I'll make that motion.
And is there a second?
This is Marlene. I second the motion.
Thank
I
you.
beat you,
And Ms.
Commissioner
Rose-
Taylor. I beat you.
You sure did. Okay, I'm okay with it.
Oh, good. That bodes well for the motion. Ms. Vo, are there any public comments on this item?
There are no public comments on this item.
All right, then I believe we are ready to vote. Would you call the roll on the motion, please?
Judy Abdo,
Yes.
Linda Aragon,
Yes.
Robert Byrd,
Yes.
Astrid Hager,
Yes.
Yvette Martinez,
Yes.
Frank Ramos,
Yes.
Romales Taylor,
Yes.
Marlene Cepeda,
Yes.
Sheila Keo.
Yes.
Motion is passed.
All right, great. Excellent. Thank you all for the very, very good work. The last item on our agenda today is a pretty pro forma. We are not certain about what the decision might be about extending the exceptions to the Brown Act or not, and therefore have taken steps to identify a temporary location for the meetings of the commission and our board committees, because if we go back in October or even later, there's still the capital improvement project going on in our building. So Craig, do you have a presentation for us, or just anything you want to tell us about this?
I have only a couple of sentences to add, Chair, and that would be that the Brown Act requires a board such as yours to actually designate the official location of its regular meetings. That's why this item is before you. So if we go to a temporary location, you will have complied with the Brown Act by adopting the resolution that's before you. It also delegates to the executive director some flexibility to sort of decide if a different location is needed, or if we're at the time to come back to the permanent location. So those are the things that are in resolution 2021-06 before the board. We recommend that the board adopt.
Now, Craig, in the resolution, there was a reference to the month of October, which made it sound as though the resolution would require us to return to in-person meetings in October. And I'm not certain whether we need to add a phrase, if necessary, or something, because we don't really know what's going to happen with the Brown Act and don't want to violate our own resolution. Do you have an analysis of that?
I think adding the words "if necessary" would be appropriate, and just note again that at the end of the resolution, the executive director has some authority to kind of respond to whatever happens legislatively or at the executive level. But I think adding "if necessary" would be a great idea.
Right, because we don't know, given the new mutations and, of course, Delta, what it's going to look like next month. So we'll add, if necessary to the part of the resolution that relates to starting to meet in October. Any comments or questions from commissioners? Don't hear any or see any. Any public comment on this?
No public comments on this item.
All right, then, may I have a motion to adopt resolution 2021-06?
This is Romales. I move that we adopt it.
Is there a second?
Frank, I second.
All right, I have a motion and a second. I think it's, I did ask for public comment. I'm sorry, I'm not remembering if I did.
You
Yes,
did.
you did.
All right, then let us move to a vote on this resolution.
Judy Abdo,
Yes.
Linda Aragon, Robert Byrd,
Yes.
Astrid Hager,
Yes.
Yvette Martinez,
Yes.
Frank Ramos,
Yes.
Romales Taylor,
Yes.
Marlene Cepeda,
Yes.
Sheila Keo.
Yes.
Motion's passed.
All right, good. So that brings us then to public comment for any items that were not on the agenda. Has anyone signed up for public comment?
There are no general public comments.
All right, then I want to thank the board as always, thank the staff. We keep on keeping on, and it actually, I think, has made a difference over the past couple of years in these very trying times. And I hope that you will all continue to do everything you can to stay safe and healthy and happy and productive and all the things that make it worthwhile. So with that, I believe the final action is to declare that this meeting is adjourned.